yo, guys and gals, me Mutahar, and boy, I'm finished making the Muda Box. Now listen, okay, we've had a lot of bad situations regarding the whole physical discs, PlayStation, Xbox, everything, right? You know, going into the future, I don't know if I'm so excited for a PlayStation that I can't even buy the discs for anymore. Now that everything is slowly moving towards a gimped computer, I decided to take the extra step over here and just make my own gosh damn game console. So, you know, even for companies like GameStop, who you would think, whoa, wouldn't losing discs be a big deal? Apparently, it doesn't matter because video game sales don't really make up this guy's business. I guess people are too busy buying Funko Pops and God knows what else than the actual games at a GameStop. And for a lot of the actual mom and pop stores, some of them that I go to in real life, I guess for a lot of them, like retro game systems like that probably are more of the business than the current generation discs and everything that are floating around. Now, for a lot of people that are going, no disc, no buy, it seems like it doesn't really matter a lot when, you know, you can get like an 8, 10, what is it, like a 12-year-old port of a Call of Duty game like Black Ops and Black Ops 2, and they sell like hotcakes, even in the face of what appears to be like this physical disc boycott. Now, look, I don't really care, okay? Boycott, do whatever the fuck you want. I'm somebody that, instead of complaining about the discs, I'm just going to switch. If the future is digital, right? I'm going to switch to the PC platform. But what if you enjoy the fun of just firing up a game console, connecting a goddamn controller, and just having a good old time, right? Well, today it's going to be that easy, ladies and gentlemen. So downstairs, I have this Muda Box connected to a television in my basement, and it's where I've been doing a lot of my gaming simply because, you know, the core of it, I do enjoy gaming on a console. I enjoy the simplicity. I enjoy just firing up my television, connecting a game controller, and actually playing a video game. That's what I enjoy doing. So I wanted to see if I could take a PC, an old computer that I had, and just, you know, actually like fucking install Linux onto it and turn it into something as simple as a PlayStation. And I am proud to say that is something you can do. So this old computer that I actually kind of had, not really old, I actually got it on a sale, which I don't have the receipt immediately on me, but just off the top of my head, comparing it to the Steam machine, which, you know, I thought this was not going to sell that well. Apparently it's selling like fucking hotcakes. A Steam machine that costs $2,000 might be this small, but the computer that I have downstairs is a computer with 32 gigabytes of memory, a i9 processor, and it comes with an AMD 6900 XT graphics card. It used to actually have a 4070, like NVIDIA. I actually removed it, which I'll get into the explanation later, and replaced it with the AMD card that I had from my dream computer that I had to remove because I found out later that purchasing a new NVIDIA card, they just take up a mass amount of space, okay? Anyways, in order to get this kind of thing working, it wasn't as simple as connecting the computer to a television and just connecting a controller. Basically, if you use desktop versions of Linux, Windows, or Mac, or whatever, right, the problem is that desktop experience usually doesn't translate well to a controller. Now, yeah, you can get yourself like a wireless keyboard mouse or whatever, but that's not the same. It's not as simple as just clicking the game on the screen, hitting a play button, and just getting right into it, you know? So ultimately for this, we had to go to a Linux distribution known as Bazzite. Now, I don't use Bazzite on my main computer. I actually use something known as Fedora Linux. But roughly, these are kind of built off the same branch. The only difference is Bazzite is actually more intended for the gamers. Now, more importantly than being intended for the gamers, they actually have different versions of this installation, whether you have a desktop computer or something like a Steam like deck or whatever handheld computer. The other benefit of this is that it's image-based, meaning that when you update the system, it's kind of a lot similar to like updating a cell phone or like, you know, a immutable like system where, you know, it updates as a whole, and if something does break, you can easily roll back. Not something that you can say for like other more like power user versions of Linux where, you know, things just can break at any given moment. This is a lot more stable. And of course, out of the box, it's secure, it's safe, and it comes with a lot of drivers, the stuff that you need to run all hosts of hardware, right? I think one of the biggest concerns that people have with like things like Linux is, Muda, my graphics card doesn't work, my controllers don't work, and a lot of these modern distributions that are built with user experiences in mind come with a lot of the stuff pre-baked in, so that as soon as you load this system up, connecting an Xbox controller, connecting a PlayStation controller, connecting some Joy-Cons, connecting your Steam control, anything will just work out of the box. So basically over here, I download a version of Bazzite, which is pretty simple, right? So in order to do this, I went to their download page, I clicked on Home Theater Computer, and I made sure that I was running an AMD GPU. You can run NVIDIA, you can even run Intel, but Steam's Big Picture mode, which is going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting in this video, works best with AMD. There are a lot of issues with NVIDIA. So we're going to stick with AMD over here, and we're going to go with KDE over GNOME. I think this is people who want to use computers for something functional, and this is for people that literally just want to make life hell for themselves. This is a desktop environment. I would go with KDE. It's closest to Windows, and it's closest to something normal. So now you download this image, and provided you have around an 8 GB like flash drive or 16 GB pen drive, you can flash this using something known as Balena Etcher, and then you can just basically make yourself an install medium. I've shown you how to do this in the past, not something crazy. So going down to my main computer, I was able to just get it fresh up and going. I connected a keyboard and mouse because it makes installation possible. You need to have something like that to walk through the actual installation. So I booted into this image, and I made sure that the live experience, once you boot into these images, you'll get to kind of like try the Linux distribution. So just kind of make sure things work, the graphic drivers are functional, it looks like a functioning desktop. Then I went to the installation tool, which is basically built into this install medium, and installing Linux, especially Fedora Linux, is incredibly easy. So the instructions are pretty simple. Basically, you set your locale settings, you make your, you basically set how you're going to use your hard disk drive, which, because this is meant to be a game console, I said wipe everything and just install all of the, basically partition it the way you need to, followed all the general default rules, set my time zones, followed everything that I could. And then the installation began. And at this point, I want to say it took probably 5, maybe 10 minutes at the most to actually install this operating system. So, comparing it to something like Windows, for instance, or even really like Mac, it's funny how fast you can start a Linux, distribution from the install medium all the way to actually having a functioning desktop. So once the Muda Box had Bazzite installed, then the system restarted. And mind you, I think this whole project only works if you're actually able to get into the system and use it like an actual controller or like a console. So once it booted up, it needed to download Steam's, software, which it basically did on its own. I just connected it to my local wireless and let it basically do what it needed to. Once Steam systems were installed, it did another restart, and then, at this point, I had to connect a controller. Now, at this point, using things like Bluetooth, I was able to connect my DualSense controller. But because this is your own gaming console, you can connect anything you want. If you have an old Xbox 360 controller, you could get that working. Old PS3, PS4, you can get that working. You got something expensive and shiny like that new Steam controller, you can get that working too. So ultimately, at the end, I got my entire system connected, and at this point, all I had to do was download Steam, which, took 5-10 minutes. Then I signed in, and lo and behold, I actually had my Steam account functioning on the box. Now from here, again, the system was basically complete. I could power off the box, and I could power it on, and you could actually see that from the boot up screen, the BIOS screen, all the way to the Steam login, it never requires a keyboard or a mouse again. You can basically just work with a controller. And if you really want to, you can hit the power button on your computer and you can put the system into a suspend mode. So you can actually suspend and resume it, kind of like a Steam Deck, right? Kind of like a Nintendo Switch. So you have that functionality that I wasn't even planning into this experiment to begin with. So once this all got working, it was easy for me to download all of my games. And, a night later, after everything was done, hundreds of gigabytes were brought in, I could play pretty much anything that I wanted. If I wanted to bore myself, put myself to sleep, fire up some Starfield. Want to play Red Dead Redemption 2? Bring up some Red Dead 2. You want to play any modern game? Depending on how fast your Steam machine or Muda Box or whatever the fuck is, you can run basically anything that you want. And the other big benefit of this is, obviously, it's also a computer. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to go a step beyond and do something that a lot of these game companies don't tend to do, out of the box. And that's real backwards compatibility, right? A lot of these companies like Sony, Xbox, Nintendo would rather you purchase old games for like 20, 30 bucks a pop. But if you have like an old DVD drive, you can actually take some of your own games, back them up, and emulate them all on your box. So here I decided to go the extra step and install another tool called EmuDeck. So this is kind of designed for Steam Decks or really handheld computers, but it works equally well on regular computers anyways. So effectively, all you do is you go to EmuDeck's website, you download their tool, and you basically follow their tool's startup guide. So it does all the emulator downloads for you, it sets up every folder so you can place your BIOSes, your game files, and everything as you need. And as soon as you're able to do that, I basically got that up and going, I set up my emulators, and I copied my entire archive of PlayStation 2 games. And within, I would say, 15, 20 minutes, plus however long it took to transfer 200 gigs of PlayStation games over to my Muda Box's internal drive, I was able to play things like Grand Theft Auto Vice City the way that it was meant to be played. I could jack up the resolution. I could even set it up down the road by using things like SyncThing to transfer my save files from my PC automatically to my Steam Deck and my computer. So I could play Vice City on one computer, and then I could seamlessly play that on something else. And that's another big benefit of something like the Muda Box, for instance, right? Honestly, like, a lot of this stuff is kind of supported by Steam. I may not be somebody that would tell you to buy a Steam Deck or a Steam machine at today's prices, but if you can build like an old computer, and I think this video is kind of important, you might be somebody that may be upgrading a computer down the road, or you may have like older computers or an older system, or just some parts that you can put together. Maybe you're in that situation. Instead of throwing away old computers and leaving that into the bins, you can take an old computer and installing Linux, you can breathe a lot of life by installing an operating system that isn't as bloated to begin with. For a lot of people that are told by Microsoft that their computer doesn't, function for Windows 11, or maybe like they don't meet system requirements, installing something like Linux really does give like an older computer like an extra few years at times, life in the space. And depending on what kind of games you play, these systems can pretty much hold on till the fucking end. If you're somebody that plays some like 2D pixel indie games, your system can probably run pretty much indefinitely. Obviously, if you're somebody that's playing the latest and greatest AAA releases, yeah, maybe you're going to be running into some issues there, right? But if your computer is powerful enough, you can play everything from like a Chef RPG all the way over to something like the newest Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake, right? And that's something that I can't stress enough in this situation. If we're moving to a all-digital future, there is no reason, in my opinion, why you shouldn't switch off to a platform that you completely control. Now, you're somebody that probably thinks, okay, I don't want to do anything with Steam. I don't really care about Steam, and that's totally fine. Remember, the emulators that I was using may have used Steam's big picture interface, but they were separate third-party programs that fall outside the purview of Steam. Using something like the Heroic Launcher, for instance, if you have games on the Epic Store, if you've bought stuff on GOG, you can install them seamlessly into your Steam machine, or Muda Box, or whatever you want to call it. You can call whatever you wish. Those will function just like they do on Steam, all right? They will function just like any other game that you've played. And because we're using the Steam OS's controller like Steam input functionality, connecting any controller and having it automatically mapped to a lot of these games or changing the mapping yourself is something you can do. I've noticed that a lot of console gamers always like to complain about the fact that, hey, I'm on a PlayStation 5 Pro, right? Or I'm on an Xbox Series X. Why can I not play something like Red Dead Redemption 2 at 60 frames per second? And you're right, you should be able to complain. You want to know why? Because even if you hack those systems, right, and run something like Linux on a PlayStation 5, you can actually see that Red Dead Redemption 2 actually does just run at 60 frames per second. The only thing stopping it is that Rockstar hasn't sent out a patch to enable 60 frames on a PlayStation. I don't know why, there's a million reasons one could imagine, but the fact that you have the control and the freedom on a PC to just change one graphic settings or something in an INI file makes this process so much better down the road. You know, the fact that you can control what your software does is the most important aspect. You know, one of the big things about Linux gaming that I can't stress enough, and something that I've been doing lately, one of the reasons why I actually just deleted my gaming virtual machines is that even modding on Linux has become so much more easier. So Cyberpunk 2077, a game that I absolutely love, I modded it using a free tool from Nexus. It's not really supported all that much, but honestly, modding video games has become such an easy thing that, you know, a lot of mods that I didn't think would function underneath Windows actually run, or underneath Linux, actually function as if they would have ran on a Windows system. So modding games has gotten a lot easier. There's an equivalent open source launcher for effectively everything under the sun, and at the end of the day, overall, the experience is pretty much shot for shot as close to Windows as I think we're getting. I think the only games for me that don't work are games that have an anti-cheat like Rainbow Six Siege, like Grand Theft Auto Online, or like Call of Duty. And honestly, I'm at that point where if your game doesn't support the Penguin, I really don't care about supporting you, if that makes sense. You know, I'm not going to be playing a Call of Duty game anytime soon. Doesn't really appeal to me anymore. Rainbow Six Siege, love that game, but if I can't play it, then I guess sayonara. And we all know what Rockstar did with the nerfs regarding GTA, so hey, the closer I am away from that fucking hell pit, the cooler it actually is. But you know, man, I'm actually fucking glad that all this physical disc stuff happened, right? Because at the end of the day, look, I think this was coming no matter what, you know? I think the era of game ownership on consoles is going to be something that, unless serious, you know, like consumer rights stuff gets like supported for the actual gamer, nothing is going to change there. I think for a lot of PlayStation gamers, you are going to be locked into an ecosystem that you have to now be comfortable with, okay? You have to be comfortable not having competition on your systems. And Xbox gamers, same thing. Same thing for the Nintendo people. So for me, being like somebody that, you know, I'm just a gamer. I'm some ordinary gamer at the end of the day, okay? I'm not some PlayStation gamer. I'm not some Xbox gamer. I'm not some Nintendo gamer. I am just some ordinary gamer, okay? So for me, I really just like playing video games. I've always played video games when I was a fucking kid. I played them when I was a teenager. I played them when I was a young adult. And I'm playing them now that I'm an old man, okay? I love fucking video games. I love video games from back in the day. And I love video games from literally today's generation. And the only way to contend with ownership is if we're going towards this digital future. Of course, I'm supporting the PC side of things because we have multiple storefronts. We have real competition. And look, down the road, when the Muda Box gets old and the games start running at like 10 frames per second, nothing stops me from upgrading the box or building a new one, hopefully when PC parts become a little bit more affordable and cheaper and like more, you know, in stock. Then yeah, I'll obviously build a new box, install Bazzite, or maybe a better flavor of Linux, and get that same experience, right? Again, I think a lot of this is possible because companies like Valve, for instance, when they made the Steam Deck, inadvertently made an actual consoleized operating system that anybody can install and turn an actual PC into something that is functionally as closest to a console as you can imagine, right? You know, it used to be back in the day, listen, there were complaints, right? Like, man, I gotta upgrade my graphics drivers. I have to make sure, oh, there's something wrong with my PC. It doesn't support this fucking game very well. Oh, PCs are confusing. No, man. Now we're at a point where even on a computer connected to a television, downloading a game is as simple as downloading something off of a PlayStation or Xbox store. Updating your drivers, updating the whole system is as simple as going to the settings page, checking for an update, applying the update, and restarting the system. In fact, I would say, if anything, this is what consoles should be like. You know, I've seen a lot of people bring up, but what about running Linux on a PlayStation 5? Yeah, you can do that, but remember, Sony is going to find ways to patch that out, okay? Those are not foolproof solutions. We are not at a situation where a PlayStation can natively run those things without hoping that there's an exploit taking place. This, on the other hand, the Muda Box is something that is built with freedom and openness in mind, okay? And I think that's really the important part. The fact that I can play modern games, I can play older games, I can play games in general. And again, if I want to use this thing like a computer, I can just go to the desktop mode and have a fully functional desktop experience for me. It's just crazy stuff, man. But yeah, honestly, I'm glad PlayStation went down this road. Like, nothing. I feel for me, it's like I can make a million videos bitching about this physical disc stuff, but what's the point? What's the fun in that, man? Like, what is the fun in that nonsense? That's just pure slop. But making a video like this where somebody who's like, man, this sucks, but whoa, you're telling me I can escape the Matrix and have my own console? And it works better than like whatever these fucking dudes are shilling? Amazing stuff. And a lot of it is thankfully possible due to Valve, due to the talented community behind Linux and Linux gaming. And ultimately, the end of it is it just comes down to how badly do you want to actually escape the closed ecosystems, right? How badly do you want to just actually make sure gaming is as friendly for you, than it can be, right? Simple as that. So, ladies and gentlemen, wild day indeed, just keeps getting better. I am going to go back to the Muda Box.